Howdy, folks, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And tonight we got a great show for you with my co-host David Null, Hawkeye Two Feathers. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, and as always, Robert, greetings and blessings to all y'all out there, and we always hope that you're doing as best as possible, and we continue to pray that each and every day, that each and every one of you will continue to learn how to accept and receive the knowledge, the healing, and the wisdom from the universe. So grab your coffee and sit back. We got a couple of stories a little later on tonight that are short. And Mr. Robert, he's going to be talking about the Sioux.
That's right, I am. I figured it deserved some well-needed attention. Some of the stuff we've talked about before, and, you know, hang on. Can you take over? I got a work call. Okay?
Yep.
Okay.
So, we were talking earlier, and having been around powwows and such myself over the years, you know, and having talked with the Lakota, and having been out west, but only for a short time, I got to experience what the West is like. And so, you know, around the Black Hills and how special the Black Hills are to the Sioux Nation and to the Cheyenne Nation. And so one of the things that we were discussing, and we'll discuss it more when Robert comes back.
All right, but, I'm
back. I was giving us a segue into what we were talking about. You know, the Sioux Nation has been known for being in the Midwest, and folks kind of scratch their head and go, but how did they get to like Wyoming and to the Dakotas and to Montana, and how to get out there? Well, there was a lot of migration, but there isn't a lot of information, and I'm kind of stealing Robert's thunder in my fill-in here, but we're going to discuss it. But it's almost like they were in the Ohio, Wisconsin, you know, Minnesota area, and then all of a sudden they were out west. So, but having known many folks over the years, they are a very proud nation. I've known some Navajo folks, and they're all native tribes that I've known. They were all very proud of their heritage and their histories and background. And unfortunately, for some of them, because of the way the white people conquered the Indian, that how they, you know, their best ways of trying to convert the native folks into being white people. And so there is a lot of history that is fragmented by all the different tribes. There are some lineages that are still there, but so some of the stories are fragmented simply because the tribes were fragmented. So sometimes, you know, we go back as far as we can with our stories and try to pick up what was said back in the 1901. So, but anyway, here we go. Robert's back.
Yeah, back in the history of the day, you know, that's the whole
back in the saddle again. But they didn't wear the natives only used blankets, so never mind.
Yeah, well, and that's what we think. They remember they didn't have cloth back, you know, way back. And I'm going to probably mispronounce some of these names, so if you want to help me out with that, you go right ahead. You know, I am Mr. Tongue-Tied Twisty. And here we go. Let me blow this up. The Sioux, or the Shakowin, or Siki Shakowin, I don't know, or the Dakota, Lakota. There's the three bands of Lakota and Dakotas, and the Dakotas. Now, last week we were talking about the Dakotas, which are a woodland Indian. Um, Now they all kind of originated as one tribe, and then they broke up into three pieces. Back in the day, they were friends with the Ojibways, but as you can see here, it says that there was another group of Indians that had different language, and of course wasn't them. And of course they broke up into they had the 7 councils, just like they had the 5 nations on the East Coast with the League of the Indians had that league of band of tribes, like the League of Nations kind of thing. Well, here they had the 7 council fires, uniting a bunch of these Indians together. Let's see what else. Well, anyway, we'll start out with the origins here, and let's blow this up. Now they believe, and this is what they say, I'm not so sure about it, but they believe that people came across the Bering Sea at some point in time, which makes no sense, that they came across, they walked down the side of the coast of California and all the way down into South America. Somehow they made it over into Mexico, and then they wandered their way up the East Coast. Now the question is so they literally came over this way, and but all respect, they keep saying that the Indians came out of the Ohio Valley. They came from the east and went west. There was Indians on the west coast. Now that's what I just don't understand a lot of that. But that's...
Can I interject here?
Yeah, go ahead.
They're trying to squash a bunch of history into a tiny little, into a tiny little sentence. Long time ago, it is suggested that back during the ice ages, there was an ice wall that was so tall, and that the water in the oceans were so lower that there was actually, up where the red arrow is, that was actually a fertile crescent of that wasn't ice and snow and everything like folks think about it now. So don't know how true that is, but when they say that the folks walked over across the land bridge, that's what they're discussing. So if that were true, and them folks migrated from Eurasia over here, but there could have been thousands of years, and so the Americas could have been populated, after they first migrated. So, okay, but then there's a lot of history that the natives were already here when they walked across the land bridge. But so if they had migrated over and started populating the Americas, it would have taken thousands of years to do it. And so then we might pick up the story 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 years later and say, okay, now there are all these tribes that have already sort of established. Now they move out of the Ohios. You know what I mean? So that could be it. I think that the tribes were here long before the land migration, but that's my personal opinion.
Oh no, I agree, and I think there was I think there was more migration than they let on. And did those migrations happen, in a different part of the world? Did some of these people come across the ocean and start settling down here? Did some, and it could be, some probably did come across the land bridge. I'm not arguing with that, but I don't think, that's the only way that they got here, was only on the land bridge, no other way.
And so, and one of the reasons, and there's a bunch of folks out there now, they call them the Clovis people, right? And supposedly they came over the land bridge, and the way they can tell, they say, is from the arrowheads and the way the arrowheads are made. And so that's how they say, well, it was the Clovis people. They came over, and then they come to find out it was like, well, wait a minute. They're finding Clovis arrowheads in places. They were like, well, we didn't know they got over here. Well, we didn't know they got over there. And then maybe they were already here, y'all, and we taught them folks over there how to use the Clovis point. So, but, so what started out to be, this is how history was, there are folks now who are going, wait a minute, we want to disagree with that. And it all hinged around the arrowhead and how the arrowhead was, it's called a Clovis point.
Yeah, exactly. We got another picture here. Pre-contact culture areas. What this is saying, seeing that they were talking about how, these people came down across here, down the California coast, and thousands of years migrated into the southern woodlands, up into the Great Lakes, and literally there was nobody on the prairies. Between the mountains and over the prairies, there really wasn't any people. And so then how did the East Coast get settled? And the California coast got settled. Mexico got settled. Well, this was barren land in here, nothing but grass and buffalo. There was nothing out here. You didn't have horses to ride, so you really couldn't do anything out here. You know what I'm saying?
Right, but I also, me, I want to be contrary. How do they know there wasn't anybody there? Because the native folks lived by leaving no trace behind. So since they didn't build any large structures or anything, how do they know it was uninhabited? They make these grandiose statements that just kind of tick me off. Like, how do you know there wasn't anybody there?
Well, I haven't found any evidence, I guess.
Right.
But like you can see here, the how the plains, the prairies, the southern woodlands, Anyway, the point is we can tell that these people were mostly on the East Coast, which I don't doubt, because on the east of the Mississippi here, there's woods and trees, and there's more small critters to hunt. It's easier hunting, more, you got to have the basics in life to survive, right?
And more water.
Yes. So here you have water. Everything east of the Mississippi, you got water. You got trees for shelter. You got trees for burning. You got a good ground out here in the East Coast too. Nice fertile soil. So everything would tell you that you'd want to live in this half of the country. And as we tell in some of these other things, that was populated by, tons of the Native Americans lived in that section of the country. And let's see if I can blow this up.
Let me interject something here. How would they know that the East was better?
That's a good question.
I mean, just, oh, hey, let's all move to the East. Well, we've heard some of the stories where some of the animals and some of the things, they said, we're going to look around here. We're going to go take off in this direction, and we're going to go to the end of to the edge of the world, which would have been the ocean.
Exactly. But, and then that says, see, you can see all the different bands on this side, all the different ones here, down into here. But when you get out in this plains area, it boils down to just a few tribes versus all of these on the East Coast. And we know we've researched a lot more than these, but this section of was very heavily populated by multiple different tribes, whereas out here they were just basically the same. You got the Sioux and branches of the Sioux. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Let's find another one here. Okay, so that goes, since you were talking about migration, here's Lewis and Clark. So once Napoleon decided to sell this chunk of the Louisiana Purchase to Thomas Jefferson, who was the president of the United States, once he sold that chunk of land, which really wasn't his to sell, because they just staked it out and said it's ours, people and everything that's on it. For the poor Indians who never seen a white man and were literally sold to the United States, don't you think?
Yep.
And all their lands. But that's what governments do. They just take over things. Anyway, so Lewis and Clark, what were their plans? They were to go across this land, and they were to go to the Pacific Ocean. So who's to say that these, like you said, these Indians here didn't migrate across and take the same route to get to the East Coast at some point in time?
Right.
Yeah. So, but they're saying that most of these developed out of this Ohio Valley area here, and then they moved west. Now, I don't disagree with that, because when the white man first came, this is where most of the Indians lived. 90% of the Indians lived on this East Coast chunk. We're not counting the West Coast chunk, but I mean the East Coast chunk, everything south or east of the Mississippi was populated by them. And we can tell because when the white man came, they pushed all the tribes west. And the tribes went west because they inherited the horse. And with the horse, they got to be a culture that would be able to travel. And as you can see here, this is what the Sioux Indians did. They would hunt the buffalo and live on the prairies, and the buffalo would sustain them, but they used the horse. The horse was there for them to.
The horse made it profitable for the natives to live in the prairie.
Yes. Because
otherwise, it was hard to, chase down a Tanaka.
Oh, yeah. This horse gave them the opportunity to hunt this animal that could kill you. If you're on foot, he could outrun you. He weighed in almost at 2,000 pounds. They were mindless to literally run you over in a big herd. They said herds could have been as big as 1 million buffalo at a time. Imagine 1 million buffalo running your way because they got spooked. Holy cow. You're dead. You're not getting out of the way of that. And they're hunting literally with the primitive weapons, bow and arrow. Okay. So
can you imagine what 1 million buffalo must have looked like? Holy mackerel.
Yeah, it must have been like a sea, unending sea of buffalo heads out there. Like
undulating, yeah. Interesting. Okay, sorry.
Okay, so I wrote a lot of this down. The Sioux people originated, they said, around in the Ohio Valley, which makes no sense. Where did the people from the Ohio Valley come from, right? And in the 5th century BC, they migrated the west to the western Great Lakes around 800 AD. And then into northwestern Wisconsin and central Minnesota is where we picked up last week with the Minnesota Massacre, was where the Indians were being pushed to. All the tribes were being pushed west, and the Sioux, the Dakota Sioux, the woodland Indians, were being pushed to the edge of western Minnesota. And some actually went to the Dakotas, and some went north to Canada, where the Nakota live. And if we don't know where the Nakota are, this is a kind of a map. The French fur traders in northern Wisconsin, Great Lake region of Minnesota. When the Dakota people told the fur traders they could come no farther west, the traders went to the Ojibwe. Now, the Ojibwe and the Dakotas were kind of friendly. But when the Ojibwe started trading with the French and getting better weapons and things, the Dakotas got mad and they had a feud, The Ojibwe elders moved his hands, a snake, and said, "Not a whiska." An interpreter said, "the snake people." However, The Ojibwe elder actually meant was that the people of the snake-like river, the Mississippi. So that's how they kind of got their name. In French, to pluralize a word, O-U-X, is often added. And soon the Dakota were known as the Nagawisu, or little snakes. Over time, the term was shortened from Nagawsi to the Sioux. Eventually, the Sioux settled the Great Plains with massive territory spanning the modern states of North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and Nebraska. The Great Sioux Nation, they were masters of horseback riding and dominated the Great Plains region for centuries, hunting bison or buffalo and living a nomadic life. And as you can see here, how, like I said, the other tribes pushed them out west, and when the horse came along, then they could inhabit the plains out here because they could travel, they could haul stuff. Remember, they used to live in little bitty teepees, but once they got the horse, they could have a huge teepee because the horse could pull it. The history is
also let me something that don't make sense in what they just said in that was that they they were avid horsemen and were like that way for centuries, but they didn't have horses for centuries.
No, they didn't. See this?
So that statement is false. They assume they don't go back into history, well, like we have, and said, well, wait a minute, when did the horse actually get here? So, but they've been doing it for centuries. That's not true.
No, this is true. The horse came
a couple of 100 years at most, right?
Yeah, the Plains Indians actually got the horse in the early 1700s. But remember, the Plains Indians here literally never seen a white man until probably around the late 1700s to early 1800s, which is many lifetimes probably for them, because it's like, hey, the horse has always been here. We've had it for 110 or 20 years now, so it's always been here. To that, you know what I'm saying?
And to them it was, but in truth, it wasn't. That's right. So that statement that they had the horses for hundreds of years is false.
Yes, they did not. See, this is where history gets misinterpreted, because they didn't have these things. Oops. There you go.
It's crisscrossed, and there are assumptions made by peoples in that, oh, it's true that they were great horsemen. It's true that they populated that area, but they don't go back in history and go, but wait a minute, they didn't get the horse until 150 years ago, so to speak. So to that fact, the native peoples adapted to the horse very well. They just,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, like I said, it's Susie's Q says they show petroglyphs that have horses. They're way older than a couple hundred years. Yeah. Well, and there might be. Maybe the horse died out, but they still haven't proved it's any older than the 1500s, because that's when the first horses came over here. Is when a little bit after Columbus came, they started bringing the horses over. So 15, 16, 17, they might have had horses for 200 or so years before the white man got here. But either way,
the petroglyphs, if you go back into prehistoric times, there was it was almost like a pygmy horse. One could say, like a Shetland pony kind of thing that had been found in the fossil records. And so if you were talking about primitive showing up, caveman kind of folks who are doing pictographs on the rocks, it could be that those pictures are that ancient to where, some of these miniature horses, were around and out west.
It could have been. I think
So
there's a lot.
there were, the fossil records show that there was some kind of horse-like critter. So
Yeah.
maybe like a zebra or something,
My question is where'd they all go then? You
Well, the
know,
great floods and fires and all that kind of stuff, that kind of wiped out all those peoples. You know what I mean?
well, yeah, but if the buffalo survived, wouldn't the horse survive?
Not necessarily.
Hmm. I mean, there's a lot of critters like, deer and elk and antelope and, smaller animals, and they all made it through. A horse, you'd think it'd be way tougher than any of them. So,
Yeah, but how many species of animals did not make it?
yeah, this is true. I
So just to, you always got to be that contrarian.
no, I agree. I mean, the horse idea is kind of sketchy with a lot of people, and I don't disagree with it at all. You know, and did they have horses and they got wiped out, and then they brought them back? And if you didn't have a horse around for a couple hundred years, you'd forget that it ever existed. And then
Yeah, it would be out of the history unless it was carved on a cave wall.
Yeah, and then you bring the horse back, and then it's like, oh, we've had him for thousands of years. I don't know. Exactly. That's the big what if question, and I can only go by what I've learned and read. Of course, George Catlin came along, and he painted the Indians. He was one of the first guys out west. And painted these Indians. And if you went to an Indian tribe, the Sioux, this is what they would have probably looked like. And all dressed up, buffalo robes, things like that.
And why would they probably look like that? Because they didn't have any preconceived notion as what the American Indian did look like. So the earlier paintings of native life may be more accurate than later, because then the artists and painters had been influenced by previous artwork, and so they could take a little bit of artistic license, where the earlier artists wanted to be absolutely factual.
Yeah, well, I mean, they had no other depiction of except for what they seen.
Exactly.
And so this is what he seen, so this is what he painted. He couldn't, but whereas this guy painting something like this, he's painting that all of these Indians have teepees, they're dressed in colorful, it's a whole different look of Indian. You know what I'm saying?
That's exactly what I was trying to get across.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they wouldn't have put their teepees that close together.
Yes, exactly. And of course, then you get into this part where they're fighting, and it's like, oh, here you got these savage guys, just fighting and riding horses and fighting with each other, kind of thing. But I don't believe it's that cut and dried and simple. Well, anyway, let's get back to.
And let me add something else too, is that there's always it seems like it's always about how the Indians were savages and therefore they were always fighting.
Yeah, they weren't really always fighting. They had their beefs with the other tribes, but they did have their bands. They did come. Warring was a rite of passage. That's how you got to be a brave. The men were the warriors and the hunters, and the women, they did all the other work pretty much. The old men, they told stories and watched the young kids and helped with things, but there was the warriors, the women, and the older people, and that everybody had a part to do. You couldn't just be sitting around. Okay, so if you want to know where the Nakota people are, because there's three bands. The Nakota people live in Canada, as you can see here in the Saskatoon area, Aspen, Calgary, Regina, Brandon, just right above the border here. This whole area is where Winnipeg This is where the Nakota Indians would have lived. Then, of course, down here is where the Lakota Indians lived in Montana, South Dakota, Wyoming, little North Dakota, and then into Minnesota was the Dakota Indians. The three groups. If we can see this here. Windows open. And now this is, okay, so this is the Lakota, basically the Great Plains. And they took over Montana, you know, all of this area was theirs. And then Bordarium would have been the Dakotas, and above them would have been the Nakota. And of course, over on this side, we got the Blackfeet, and below them is the Crow, and we got the, you know, oh gosh, I can't think of the name, but anyway, there's more of them. But wish I could remember all the names. I can barely keep my own name. Anyway, get on with some reading here. The Sioux, they referred to the Great Plains who lived in the region. They say 13,000. Now, I go with you on this, where they say that these people lived there for 13,000 years before the arrival of the Europeans in the 17th century. But yet, I read in another part where it says they came up out of the Ohio Valley and they adopted the agrarian lifestyle around 700 to 900 BC, and when they cultivated corn, and they had corn from Mesoamerica. When the horse came to Americas, these tribes moved out to the plains hunting buffalo. Well, you can't live on the plains for 13,000 years and then say you came, see, and then it goes into the Sioux originally are from the Mississippi River Valley as well as the Great Lakes region. But wars with the Iroquois, the Ojibwe nations forced their migration west. The name Sioux, we went through that. Okay, the people of the Seven Council Fires nations, referring to the 7 original Sioux tribes who brought the coals from their individual fires to kindle the collective fire at council meetings. These tribes are the Metawankan, the Sisseton, the Teton, the Wakapute, the Wapatons, Yanktons, and the Yanktani. So the tribes came to be referred to as the Dakota or Lakotas, and formerly Nakota. Through this has not been changed, which their allies or friends. These 7 are related to other tribal nations through language and culture. Originally hunter-gatherers, the Sioux adopted the agrarian lifestyle, introduced the maize from Mesoamerica, but continued to hunt and maintain semi-nomadic social model as they followed wild game, namely buffalo. The traditional socioculture model changed in the late 17th and early 18th century with the arrival of European firearms and their mastery of the horse, brought to America in the 16th century by the Spaniards, making them one of the nations designated by modern scholars as belonging to the horse culture of North America. Yeah, definitely a horse culture. Move that one over. And, okay, so where are we? Okay, so as you can see, they lived on these plains, you know, and they adopted the lifestyle of hunting buffalo and wild game, moving, living in teepees, you know, gatherings on the plains, you know, making the best of it all. Of course, when the Americans came across, they went to war because the settlers came wanting their land. It wasn't a very good thing. This is kind of where history really picks up because we have record of it. Literally until the 1840s and 50s, these areas had really not been touched. The Indian was not the enemy of the white man until the settlers came and started taking their lands and shooting all their buffalo. One of the more famous, guys, would have been fighting would have been Sitting Bull. Now, as times progressed, we have images of this guy. This is why things aren't so long ago. I mean, you think about this, that happened, 150 years ago, but really, you have pictures of these people. It's pretty modern. These people were still living in the woods or on the plains, Sitting Bull. He was made
And for
famous.
a lot of people, for myself, having, hung around, native folks for quite a few years, having stayed in a real teepee, for a week or so, and camped out there. And until you've been in what I would consider a modern teepee, to where they've got the inside liner in, where they got the rugs and things on the ground, and when it's really set up, it's very comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, but it's not like just going out and setting up a tent. Now, but when it's when it's decked out, teepees are sort of like you see some of those folks over in the sands, and with their camels, and then they set up their tents and everything, and lay out their carpets, and the inside of their tents are like palaces. So in a way, the native folks are like that. So a lot of folks just think that they were savages and that their houses were just this tent.
Yeah, not so. It was like a little house.
Right. And
And
yeah, they could move them, and and it doesn't really take very long, especially when you know what you're doing, to roll up your blankets and everything. And it only takes a couple of minutes to take a teepee down. It really doesn't take long, and it doesn't take that long to set it up either. But to the point, though, it's a very adequate housing. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been using them for centuries.
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna get in. We're getting into the more modern. Like I said, it was really hard to find anything that was. I don't know if anything's really truthful because of the fact that they're telling us that they lived here for 13,000 years, but yet they came from the Ohio Valley, and then I don't know. I really don't know, but I do understand that they migrated, and maybe they did. Anyway.
Well, to the south are the Hopi, and of course a little bit more to the west, but also the Navajo. So there were native tribes established in the Americas, and we do know that they went back up a long ways. So and part of that statement could be true. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like the Navajo there, we had they made solid structures, that can be dated way back because they didn't move around. They weren't very nomadic. They made those adobe houses, and once you make one, and it takes a while to destroy one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and also the cliff dwellers too. So where the Plains Indians, the folks out west, the best they could do was build a mound.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So, let's see here. So anyway, they had this is the Ogawa. This was Spotted Tail. As you can see, he's wearing clothes of the white man already. But he was one famous chief. Let's see. And then and these guys originally they started out with the in these teepees. They probably never seen a white man until they got to be 20 years old or so. Okay, and as you can see by this map, and you were talking about the Navajo and here, and this is the Apache area. The Navajo are in here, this little area. The Shoshone, the Crow, the Sioux, and basically the Sioux were this whole plains area, because by the time the white man started to record all of this stuff, this is where they were living. These were the tribes. And I would say, in my opinion, that's why this map looks the way it does, is because as the white man came across, this is what he recorded. But history had already changed things by the introduction of the horse and firearms. You know from our stories of Lewis and Clark, when they got out to the West Coast, the Indians on the West Coast already had some firearms. They didn't have many, but they had some.
Yep.
And Lewis and Clark had never been there. So somebody was out there and traded them people for firearms, meaning that, somebody with some knowledge and brought them out there. They didn't get them magically or make them themselves. But those firearms gave that tribe the upper advantage. So we got the wars. And of course, the U.S. government came along and decided that they wanted the land, and the settlers were coming, and there was gold out there, and the wars came. Well, as we know, these tribes inherited or, lived in some of these areas in North Dakota, Montana, where they found gold and most all of these places. And as times have it, after all the wars and everything that went on, these people are now reduced to small little bitty chunks of reservation, as you can see here. So instead of owning all of this land, they have little itty bitty chunks of this land, which are pretty good sized chunks, I should say, but not like they did, putting it simply. And they were forced into living like the white man. They, the white man made it really hard. They would take their kids and, take them to school, chop their hair, tell them not to speak the language, teach them the white man's language, teach them how to farm, teach them other things other than the Indian way. They were trying to take the Indian out of the man. You get what I'm saying?
And the women, yep.
And the women do, yeah. Change their, from a child, and but that's the way to do. Really, I guess if you change the children, they won't know what their heritage is. They will just go on being who they are.
That's sort of what I was talking about at the very beginning, when you had to take that call. And in that, there was the separation of the families, there was the separation of the cultures, and so the children were taken off, and they couldn't sit around and listen to the stories from the grandparents.
Yep. Yeah. So exactly. No grandparents to go to listen to the stories. You just have the white man stories. Anyway, yep. Last and least thing is we know that what always defeats a nation or whatever is always the weapons of choice. And now the European settlers come over and they have the gun with gunpowder and everything. The Indians, they had this. They had clubs, knives, hatchets, tomahawks. They'd call these ones here with the round skull crackers. You just take your enemy and get real close and you whack them in the head. Of course, this is one of the better ones they had, was just a stick with a stone on it tied to it, making it pretty simple. You also have the bow and arrow. A plain regular bow. This is no compound bow, and some simple arrows. And you can see these are probably more modern arrows that, I can't get it up much closer than that, but you can see these got metal tips on them. Looks like metal tips anyway. But the different kind of arrows we have, homemade too. I mean, how straight will that arrow fly compared to one of our modern day ones made out of aluminum, or so straight? These are just sticks. Find a straight stick and you tie your arrowhead onto it and you hope for the best.
It didn't even have to be straight. Yeah. Because I've worked wood myself, And because I saw some folks do it, and I was like, nah, it can't be that easy. But if you can take a stick and soak it in some water and pass it over a fire, and you can straighten one of the most crooked stick out, you can make it straight, or
Yeah.
at least as straight as the lumps on the branch or whatever would do. But one of the things that amazes me is here are these native folks who brought them the bow, who taught them how to make an arrow, who taught them how
That's a
to
good question.
fletch it. In other words, there's feathers on the end of the arrow. Who how did they learn that it was important to have feathers on an arrow? Because it helps make the arrow fly straighter and longer distance. And but who taught them that? So I mean, yeah, there's the arrows and everything, but who taught them about the aerodynamics? You know what I mean? I'm just putting it out there because they've known it for years,
Yeah.
centuries. So somehow it got passed along. You know what I mean? Somebody taught them.
Yep. Somebody taught them. Exactly. Of course, you got knives, and they probably pounded these out from little pieces of metal and made their own, using a deer antler as a handle, a little bit of leather here sewed up. I mean, nothing really fancy, just practical.
Most of the natives did not use metals though until the white man came and showed them, but they did work obsidian and
Yes.
flint. So where that knife had a metal blade, just replace it with obsidian or flint.
Well, yeah, and of course you got their the club here with their stone tied on it, and this would be a formidable weapon. A stick with a stone on it hits you in the head, crack your skull right open, and you're dead.
Or an arm or a leg. You could
Yeah.
break get hit on the kneecap with that puppy.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to slow you down.
Very much, very much. And like I said, they made the best of it all. Using those arrows and that bow with the horse combination to take down the buffalo to make their, get their food and supplies. Quite the invention. Here's that other one I was showing you before. Here's another one. Like I said, I don't know how many pounds that recurve bow would have, and how long would that take you to make? Oh,
Not
man.
long.
You don't think so?
No, not at all. The hardest part would be to find the right wood for the bow, and the other thing would be to make the string.
Oh, yeah.
Making the string, because you got to be able to have something that's strong enough to pull that bow back without it breaking. So
yes, very. I never thought about that string.
yeah, you can find a piece of stick and tie a string to it and make a cheap bow, but you got to have the string.
Yep. Yeah, that's so true. Let's see where else. Anyway, did I miss something? Let me do this one. The Cinnabon. Okay, so this is another map of where these people lived, and this was the Hidatsa and the Nakota people over here. They did a lot of trading with the French and stuff in there. And like you said, these are the reservations they're limited to now. So you can see these are really small reservations compared to this. This is Fort Berthold Reservation right here. This is where I live, right in here, this area. So, and once you get there, it looks big on the map, but it's really not that big. It's quite small. Okay, I think I hit most of this stuff.
I got a question.
Yes.
Did you find any pottery that was traditional Sioux?
No, I didn't. I didn't find any of that. Just at the moment, I didn't get to look for that. Here, pre-contact Sioux culture. This is what it's kind of ending up trying to get. Mostly was this pre-culture of the Sioux, and which is really hard because there is not a lot of it. You know what I'm saying? Is there's not a lot of pre-culture because there was nobody to record it, and the only way they recorded their stuff was by the myths and legends that they passed down, right? Here, the pre-contact Sioux men. Remember when we were talking about this? Sioux men acquired status by performing brave deeds in warfare. Horses and scalps obtained in a raid were evidence of valor. Sioux women were skilled porcupine quilled and bead embroidery, favoring geometric designs. They also produced prodigious numbers of processed bison hides during the 19th century, when the trade value of these buffalo robes increased dramatically. Community policing was performed by men's military societies, like the dog soldiers. The most significant duty of which was to oversee the buffalo hunt. Women's societies generally focused on fertility, healing, and the overall being of the group. Other societies focus on ritual, dance, and shamanism. And now when I hit something else on here, they were talking about the buffalo hides in the 19th century. Now, up until in the 1860s, buffalo hides weren't really worth a whole lot because they didn't know how to process them in huge quantities, especially like the bull buffalo. The female cow had the best hides, and the bull had such a thick hide that there was no way to really process it. But up until the 1860s, once they invented a process to use those hides, it wasn't very practical. So once they had that process, buffalo hides became worth something. And then, of course, once they figured out how to tan them, then they used them in industry for belts, on machinery, furniture, everything, clothes, you name it, they used it. Oh, Elderberry says sinew was twisted and made into bowstrings. Very, very good. Thank you. Susie Q, she's going to lay down. Oh, she loves us bunches. Thank you, Susie Q. Queen Peachy Queen's in the house. Okay. So anyway, yeah. So these things. Let me go. It said they had different languages. Nothing much else. They lived on the prairies in the middle 17th century. The Santee Sioux lived in the area around the Great Lakes in Superior, where they gathered wild rice and other foods, hunted deer, buffalo, and speared fish from canoes, prolonged the continual warfare with the Ojibwe, like I was saying before, to their east, drove the Santee into what is now the western Minnesota, at the time of the territory of agriculture, Teton and Yankton. In turn, the Santee forced these two groups from Minnesota into what is now North and South Dakota. Horses were becoming common in the plains during this time. And instead, once they were moving, and the other tribes pushed them, and they became the Plains Indians. And I think it was all because the Europeans were taking the land. And we've done plenty of shows on how they were pushing. The Indians thought there's more land. We'll give them that land. We'll just move east. We'll just keep moving east. There's more land out there. And there's better hunting. Let's go. Let them, but eventually there's nowhere to go. Land runs out. Right?
Yep. And to this day, Wyoming, it's a huge state, but there's about maybe 2 million people live there.
No, I don't
And
even think.
so
I don't even
maybe.
think. No, not even 2 million. There's not even a million.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
Montana.
okay.
I think Montana barely has a million people. North Dakota barely has a million people in the whole state. So these.
My point is that there is a lot of land out there still that's owned by huge farms
Yes.
or the government.
Well,
But and so, you know, people say that, oh, we're overpopulated. If you'd been out west and seen how much land there is, not really.
no, but here's the bad part. The bad part is there's not resources on that land. Like I said, in order to, like I always look at it like I'm gonna bug out and I'm gonna have, build a cabin in the middle of nowhere, but you don't have water and you don't have heat and you don't have these certain things, food. You can have all the land you want, but if you don't have those resources, it's worthless. You see what I'm saying?
Agreed.
So, yeah. So, there's like, if you were a settler and you were coming out this way and you found a nice chunk of property and there was no water on it, well, you're SOL. And well, then like the plains, what would you burn for wood? There's no trees. I mean, you'd have to ship all of that in. You couldn't. They didn't have drills and drill for gas and oil, so you got no gas. You got nothing. You got nothing. You're gonna freeze in the winter because there's nothing to burn. That's why they were picking up the buffalo patties and burning them. Ugh, I can't imagine the smell. Oh, we're warm. It smells like poop, but we're warm. Yeah, there's ways to look at it. If you don't have the water, there's plenty of food out here, but whereas there's deer and elk and there's buffalo running around and stuff, but you're limited on all the other things. If there's no water, there's no heat to heat your teepee up. Man, you're SOL. Even today, like I said, Wyoming, great open spaces, but there's nothing out there. No grass, pretty much a desert area. There's no rainfall. If you want to have a garden, you're going to have to import water to water it. How fun is that? Anyway. So yeah, see, but east of the Mississippi, there's lots of resources for that, which is nice, but that's why it's so populated. And along the coast areas, like California, along the west coast, mostly the coastlines around lakes and stuff, you're talking waterways, easy ways to get around the rivers and stuff where like nature's highways. Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
So anyway.
And food source.
Yes, and a food source. But with that, I'm going to wrap it up for my half. I guess I hope y'all learned a little bit about the Sioux. It was kind of interesting to check into that, but it's really hard to find pre-culture of the white man because there's really nothing out there. The best I can say for pre-culture of the Indians is to read lots of myths and tales, creations of the earth, how they found fire, how the sun was created, how this was happening, because even though they use animals for their stories, that's how they pass down the knowledge. So, Mr. Hawkeye, are you going to tell us a story tonight that's going to tantalize us with all kinds of good stuff?
Probably just confuses.
Oh, don't worry. We're confused already.
Because this next story up in queue is Search for Fire.
Search for fire. Okay. Okay, off the hook.
Now,
Thank you. And I'm gonna just say who's all here before they because there'll be more coming in because I know they all love to hear the stories. Peachy Queen is here. Off the hook. F Kitty. Elderberry. He says buffalo chips. Yes, buffalo chips. Let's see who else is here. Richard the Red. Rest up. He says. Let's see who else says. Susie Q. I see you, Susie Q. Isn't there a song like that? Yep. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here tonight, and whoever else might be joining us that I didn't see. Sorry if I missed you. Anyway, I'm sure Lucky Stone's out there probably listening, but he's working. So anyway, search for fire. I got this presented right here. You are set. This is where we're actually going to learn something tonight, right?
maybe.
Maybe. Okay. It's all yours.
Okie dokie. Give me a sec. I'm pulling cards. Well, that's just interesting. So, our story is Search for Fire. Akomawi. Akomawi. Let me get my spectacles on. Now, our previous story, there was a great flood. And so after Hawk had been killed and the flood had subsided, people found that all fires were put out all over the world. Nothing could be cooked, but for a time people did not trouble about it. Then after a few days, they began to talk about it and sent Owl to Mount Shasta to look all over the world and see if he could find any trace of fire. Owl took a feather blanket and went. Lizard watched him go and told the people how he was getting on. After a while, when Owl did not come back, people thought he was dead. But Lizard said, "Shh, I can still see him." Owl got to the top at last, very tired and wet with sweat. Lizard saw him look all about. He looked west twice, and there saw smoke coming from a sweat house. After a while, Owl came down from the mountain and, coming back, told people what he had seen. The next morning, all got ready and went off to the west, to where the smoke had been seen. Everyone had a cedar bark torch. Dog had some punk hidden in his ear. Late in the evening, they arrived at the house and asked to be allowed to warm their hands. Dog held his ear down, and fire caught in the punk. Then everyone thrust their torches into the fire and ran. The people in the house were angry and struck at them as they ran off. Coyote's fire gave out first, then another's and another's, until finally all were out except that which Dog had in his ears. The people who owned fire had made it rain, and this put out the people's torches. No one knew that Dog had fire. They got home and were much troubled, for they thought the fire had all been lost. Dog was laughing and said, "I am sweating." Coyote got angry at this and said, "Hit him, knock him out." Then Dog said to Fox, "Look in my ear." When he did so, he saw the fire. He took out the punk, made fire from it, and so the people had fire again. Loon Woman, Akomawi. Loon Woman wanted a husband. She wished to marry Wildcat. He was a treasure, something that was kept in a sack hung up in the house, and no one ever touched it or saw him. So she asked the people to take down the sack, but they were afraid. Then Pine Martin, who was the chief, said, "Take it down," and they did so, and gave Wildcat to her. So Wildcat and Loon Woman went away together toward the sunset. And when night came, they stopped and camped. Early in the morning, Wildcat, being weary, rose from his bed while Loon Woman still slept, and went back to where his people lived. They took him and put him back in the sack, and tied it up and put it under the roof where it had been before. By and by, Loon Woman awoke and missed her husband and was angry. She rolled about on the ground, crying, "Oh, oh!" And as she did so, fire burst from beneath her, and as it blazed, it cried, "Toop, toop, toop!" Then the ground burst open, and there was a great canyon there. Loon Woman walked about, saying all the time, "Oh-ho, oh-ho, oh-ho!" And always the fire blazed up, and all the earth was burned. The rocks cracked and split, and the ground turned red. The people in the house where Wildcat was began to be afraid as Loon Woman came nearer, and they sat about hanging their heads. Then Cocoon Man spoke and said, "Why do you sit hanging your heads? Why don't you kill her? A little while ago you killed Hawkman when he tried to drown you. You are strong only in talk." Then the people and the chief thought what they could do. The Mice brothers took ryegrass and spliced it together and shot it with an arrow into the sky so that the ryegrass cord hung down to the earth and came in through the smoke hole. Then all the people began to climb up away from the earth. As Coyote was snuffling, hiss, 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 for he was sorry to leave his daughter Loon Woman behind. And as he climbed, he looked down, and the rope broke just as he was almost up to the sky. And all the people fell back to the earth, falling into the midst of the blazing house, which they had escaped from. Loon Woman saw them fall and hurried to make a net, that she might catch their hearts as they burst. One by one, the hearts flew out, and Loon Woman caught them and threaded them on a cord and put them about her neck for a necklace. Some of the hearts she did not keep, however, but gave them to Silver Fox. Then she ran away and traveled all over the world. Her sister, Eagle Woman, searched everywhere for her, for she wanted to get the hearts, that she might restore the people to life. As she sought, she kicked up the earth, and so the mountains were made. Finally, she secured the hearts and brought them back to where the house had been. she rebuilt the house and then put the hearts in water in the river, and at daybreak they came to life, and the people came trooping back into the house. Then Silver Fox named them and told them to go away and spread all over the world, and said where each one was to live. And to everyone he gave his cry, and he painted them with their colors, and they went away, some in one direction, some in another. Now, as an asterisk, it says, how this came about is not stated. The latter portion, as well as much of the tale, is very incomplete and obviously abbreviated. It is said that up to the end of this story, all the events of creation move in an orderly manner in one connected series. After the animals, however, had been dispersed in this way, there was no longer any definite series, and the many stories told of their subsequent doings are without sequence. Now, isn't that interesting? Now, we had just discussed how the native folks got dispersed, how the Cheyenne came from the Midwest, and how this one went there. And so this is how the legends are told. So, the hearts were secured around her neck in a necklace, and she went about the world and, then put them back into the water and rehydrated them, I guess, and the peoples came back. And then Silver Fox named them and told them to go away and spread all over the world. So that is an interesting take on how the peoples spread around. Now, do we have time for another one?
Oh yeah, we got plenty of time. I was gonna say, yeah, when you were talking about this and it's talking about the whole thing, sounds like, okay, so this was a creation story where things were destroyed in some sort of cataclysm, say, and then their hearts, she restored them with water or something, and it's like, here, I guess what I'm trying to think in my head is, you couldn't tell somebody back in the day, oh, there's this thing called DNA, or minerals, and we're made up of minerals. That would be too complicated, right? But you could say their heart, which is the essence of life, which is the meaning, and then they restored them and spread them all over the world like seeds, right? And but somebody was doing this. You see what I mean? So during a cataclysm, somebody took the DNA and then recreated all that we know today. You agree or disagree on that?
And we're able to save creation, if you will, because in the story before last week, the world, Hawk tried to drown the world and everything in it. Yeah. And so you could think about the story of Noah and the great flood, and go, well, wait a minute now. And so what did a bird was sent out to find out if there was any land, right? So, yep. Was fire, lost at the same time? Just as a curiosity. I mean, so for a while it was okay, but then it got to be like, it'd be really nice to have a good hot stew.
Well, but that's the thing. I think these legends are code words, because to primitive people, you couldn't talk like fire. Fire could represent knowledge. It could the knowledge, or like you said, oh, it'd be nice to have a hot fire. Well, really, you don't get rid of fire. You know, common sense says that, you know, I can rub two sticks together and create fire anytime I want. But
Yeah, but that wasn't always true. And through all the stories of different stories that I have learned over the years before you and I started doing this, was that, you know, caveman, when they traveled around, they had these special little nests that they would take coals and put in.
yes.
And there was a fire tender, and that person was responsible, you know, to keep that coal going. And so, you know, that was before they learned about flint, and of course they didn't have steel back in those days. So, and they didn't understand about the making fire with sticks or, you know, a bow. And so way back in the day, they literally carried the fire with them everywhere they went. And if it rained, they were, you know, SOL.
Oh, yeah, I agree on some of that stuff, but I do think that we got to give man more credit. The thing is if I'm I'm going to put it this way. Okay.
I'm talking about a long time ago, okay?
Well, well, no, I totally agree. But if I carry this coals of my fire with me, right, in the little bag, like you're talking about, I can have fire instantaneously, like right away. Versus, like you were saying, now I got to go find some sticks. I got to work really hard. What if it's raining? I don't get fire. You know, making a fire from scratch is way harder than just getting some sparks from a coal that you've been carrying with you. You know what I'm saying?
I agree. But if your material is wet, it's difficult no matter what.
Well, no, and that's what I'm saying. So if you were carrying this little pocket of hot coals with you, no matter if it rains or not, you're going to have fire. You don't have to sit there and say, well, the sticks are all wet. I can't start a fire. I don't have any matches. You know, I can't start a fire right now. I'm going to have to sit in the cold where if I carried this little pouch with me and it's already got hot coals in, I can take whatever and I can make something burn. It's already burning, like a lighter. You know, a lighter is like carrying fire in your pocket. But
yep,
taking two sticks and rubbing them together is going to take me a long time. And maybe you don't have a long time to start that fire. I don't have 2 hours to start a fire. I want to start a fire now. I just, I'm hungry. I'm cold. I'm done traveling. Here, I'll take the little pouch out. I'm blowing into it. All of a sudden, there you go. I got fire going. Let's have a campfire right now. I think that's more likely. I give the people aren't, if they could move those giant stones and they could do all of it, make a bow and arrow, and they could, chip rocks into spearheads. I got to give them credit to say that fire is probably one of the easier things to create. At least that would be the first on my list of creations. Don't you think?
I think it was, it came with time. I think that while they were making their flint arrowheads, they saw sparks.
It could be.
And so they learned about fire. But all of the stories that I've read over the years has all about how, Beaver went across the lake and stole fire from the giants and put it on his head and came back, and how they sent mouse one time, and the different stories of, I think one of them was how Coyote went and stole fire, and so there was always somebody else that had fire, and the native peoples had to go get it. So that's across the board. All the stories talk about how they had basically how they had to steal fire from somebody.
Which, and I kind of agree, but that's why I says maybe the fire is a representation of knowledge.
Nah, fire meant fire.
I don't know. I mean,
fire meant fire because knowledge came in other ways, but fire meant warmth, light, cooked food. I mean, so you could say, well, fire represented this. No, but fire in and of itself was important, just as it is today. I got a lighter sitting here, click, and I got fire. Where back in the day, it was, you had to have a coal or you had to know how to make it. So the series, after all the stories I've read over the years and told about fire, I think fire just meant fire.
Okay. I'm, like I said, I'm just trying to look on the other side of the coin there and really see what they might have been saying in this legend, in this story. Is it really, I don't know. I mean,
I understand where you're coming from, but in this instance, fire meant fire. Fire, because it was that important, Well, fire meant fire.
Yeah, fire is an important thing.
And and it was better than knowledge, and the knowledge of having fire, and being able to use it, and the fact that they had cedar sticks for torches. They knew what would burn, for example. That's sort of a little hidden thing in there. They all took their little cedar torches with them, and then when they got there to that house, they all stuck them in, caught their torches on fire, and then hauled butt.
Yeah.
So, but in that particular instance, because there's a lot of other things that I would absolutely agree represent knowledge or some other thing, but in these stories here, we are so basic that fire means fire.
Okay, I'm with you. You gonna do another one here? The Lost Brother?
Yeah, it's a short one, so we can take a pause for the cause, and I'll start this one.
All right, sounds good. I always like these.
Number 6. These are Akumawi and Atsugawi, Tales and Myths by Dixon. The Lost Brother, and it's an Akumawi story. Fisher and his brother Weasel were living together. One day, Lizard stole Weasel and carried him off, and Fisher hunted in vain for him. As he went about searching, he kicked up the earth and so made the mountains. One day, some mice came to Fisher's house as he lay asleep. They came to get some meat from a deer he had killed. They cried and talked at the same time, throwing dust in their eyes for grief. Fisher gave the mice some meat and told them how his brother had been stolen by Lizard while gathering wood. The mice said that they thought he could find his brother again somehow. Then Fisher asked them to help, to go and ask Sun where he was. He promised to give them feathers and beads and paint to give the Sun. Mice agreed to go, and taking a long cord, tied it to an arrow and shot it up to the sky, where it stuck firmly. Fisher then gave them the gifts he had promised, told them to ask Sun if he had seen where Weasel was, for he could see all over the world. If Sun did not answer at first, they were not to be discouraged, but to go on ahead of him along the road he traveled in the sky, and to ask him again. The mice started and climbed up to the sky, to the road on which the sun traveled. He came along carrying his daughter on his back in a basket. The mice asked him to stop and said that they had come to see him and had brought presents from Fisher, who wished to know where his brother had been taken to. Sun did not answer, but walked steadily on. So the mice ran ahead and asked again. And then Sun stopped. He said he could not see Weasel, but that a man lived far away at Baiwa, that he had no children, yet he could see him with a little white boy, which might be Weasel. The mice said that they were sure it was and gave the gifts to Sun, after which they came back down the rope to Fisher's house. The mice told Fisher all that they had done and said that Sun had said that Lizard had a small boy with him who might be Weasel. Fisher thanked them and sent them away. He felt happy, for he knew where his brother was. He built a fire, took out his arrows and dried them, and in the morning started off to where Lizard lived. Lizard went out to catch ducks, and when he left, he told Weasel to stay behind in the house and to watch his bow and arrows. As Fisher came near, he caused trees to grow in front of him to conceal his approach. Weasel had gone out to get some wood and saw his brother. He was glad to find him, and they talked together and decided how to escape. Weasel made a great fire in the house and then took Lizard's bow and arrows and threw them in. Then joined Fisher, and the two ran off. Lizard was looking back and saw the big fire in his house and came back in a hurry to see what was the trouble. He found his weapons burned, all but a few arrows. These he took and started after the two brothers. They and Lizard traveled very fast. As they snapped themselves from one mountaintop to another by means of an arrow flaker. Fisher tried to escape, but Lizard always got in front of him, so at last they fought. Fisher put Weasel in his quiver and fought as hard as he could, but by and by got very tired. Every now and then Weasel would pop his head out and say, "He nearly hit you then. Be careful, brother." Toward sundown, Fisher was very tired and looked to see where Blue Jay was. He was out stalking deer with a deer head on as disguised, and seeing deer, he was creeping up on them and did not see the conflict. The deer were startled by it, however, and ran, and Blue Jay, looking up, saw Fisher retreating backwards towards him. Blue Jay was an older brother of Fisher's and came to his aid and succeeded in hitting Lizard in the belly, when he burst in two and was killed. Then Fisher stood up and wiped the sweat from him and went home with Blue Jay and Weasel. The end. There wasn't any head chopping.
No head chop.
But he did get split in two.
Yeah, burst his belly, and yeah, good story. Like it.
So, but and these are in a row, you know. So the first ones we read last week or so, you know, were about Hawk and the flood, and now these pick up further down the line. So, but anyway, interesting how, you know, we talked earlier about how the early painters had to paint the Indian and folk, and because they had no previous, you know, record of what the natives looked like, no preconceptions. So,
Yep.
you know, they painted them as they were without any flamboyance to it, is I guess where I'm headed with that. But so here in some of these stories, you know, what did they have as a reference? But weasel and bear and, you know, these other things. So they didn't have any other reference points to be able to, you know, say, well, I saw an airplane in the sky, or, you know, I mean, they had no references to what other things were. So they were told in animal stories and in ways that, you know, how did Blue Jay get there all of a sudden in the story?
Yeah,
I was like, where did Blue Jay pop in? You know, it's like, but now Blue Jay in the next story is part of the story. So, you know.
Yeah, and then it starts out with the sun, and then it went into, you know, like you said, a weasel. Weasel was a boy, and they were looking for him, and then it turned into Blue Jay at the end. Yeah, so
and Blue Jay was an older brother of Fisher.
Yeah.
Now, in this instance, do we know what Fisher is?
No, I don't know. Fisher.
I do, I think. Okay. And so there was Owl who was sent off, and then now here's Blue Jay is an older brother.
Mm-hmm.
Fisher is a kingfisher, which is a bird.
Yeah, bird.
So a fisher, what kind of fisher is it? You know, is it a person? Is it a man? But we can tell by the way the story comes out that Fisher is a kingfisher, is a fish, is a bird.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I pulled 4 cards.
Four.
And very interestingly, they're all upside down.
Okay.
They're all upside down. Not necessarily, we know that it's not necessarily a bad thing, but they're all upside down. So first one out is swan, then the dog, and then otter, and then dragonfly.
Dog and dog in a while.
Swan, dog, otter, and dragonfly. That was the order in which I pulled them. Now we know that swan is grace, I'm pretty sure. Yep. Swan is grace. So the story of Swan is she went into the dream time looking for the future. And as Swan looked high above Sacred Mountain, she saw the biggest swirling black hole she'd ever seen. And Dragonfly came flying by, and Swan stopped him to ask about the black hole. And Dragonfly said, Swan, that is the doorway to other planes of imagination. Dragonfly has been the guardian of the illusion for many, many moons. If you want to enter there, you would have to ask permission and earn the right. And so Swan was not so sure, but entered and received permission to go into the void. And it says, if you pull the swan in reverse, it is a warning that you must acknowledge what you know. So stop denying your feelings and clutching up. You may be bumping into furniture or forgetting what you are saying in mid-sentence. If so, this is a sign that you are not grounded. Jump in place and hold the top of your head as you do so. This will get you back in touch with the earth and keep you from wandering into a dreamy reality that lessens your focus. So if you stay in the dream time too much, you can't grab a hold of reality. A bath will help, as does going barefoot or doing some gardening. In any case, Swan Reverse says that you need to pay some close attention to your body. It can seem as if you are flying without a pilot's license. So notice your surroundings and touch the earth with your feet or hands. Focus on one reality or the other. If you are being called to visit the dream time, stop what you are doing and be still. Enter the silence and empty your mind of chatter. Be receptive and open so that the message may enter your consciousness. So Swan's telling you to ground. Now, the next one up is Upside Down Dog, number 14 in the book. I think dog is companion loyalty. So we all know that dogs are loyal to a fault. Even if you beat them, they'll still, most of the time, they'll still, hang around their master. And dog has been considered the servant of humanity throughout history. If a person carries dog medicine, he or she is usually serving others or humanity in some way. Here you will find the charity worker, the philanthropist, the nurse, the counselor, the minister, and the soldier. Dog was the servant soldier that guarded the tribe's lodges from surprise attack. Dog is a medicine that embodies the loving gentleness of a best friend and the half-wild protector energy of territorial imperative. Now, the upside down is in the contrary position. Dog may be telling you that you have become critical or mean due to the company you may have been keeping. The reversal of this medicine could also imply that it is time to stop cowering with fear. Now, I would agree with that. There are a lot of things in this day and time that people are just scared to death. And time to begin to tackle the adversaries of your confidence. In other words, your confidence is lacking. Buck up. The key is to realize that these are not external enemies, but thought forms in your own mind which tell you that you are not worthy or loyal enough, either to yourself or to others. You may want to examine the patterns of disloyalty in your life. Do you, for example, pass on gossip or not speak up when someone else is rumor mongering? So this is a time when, there are a lot of people telling, stories and making up stuff and trying to keep in the chaos. So reclaim the power of loyalty to self and to self-truths. Become like dog. Be your own best friend. Now, the next one is otter, number 8. Otter is always about playfulness. Otter is woman medicine. Otter is very caring of its young and will play for hours, performing all types of acrobatics. The elements of earth and water are the female elements. At home in both of these environments, otter is the personification of femininity. Otter is the true coquette of the animal world. Otter is always on the move and is very curious. Unlike other animals, otter will not start a fight unless it is attacked first. This joyful little critter is adventuresome and assumes that all other creatures are friendly until proven otherwise. Now, the contrary of the otter is, if otter appears reversed, you may be running from one idea to another without focus. And Swan is kind of telling us also, about focus, that pick one reality or the other. So this could also imply that you have forgotten how to receive and are blocking a gift from the universe with your male side. Oops, all us male guys. If this is the case, you may be embarrassed to receive compliments, to have someone hug you, or to allow your genuine personality to come out. Fear of being rejected is the contrary message of the otter. Drop the seriousness on all levels and play it live so that the fear rolls off your back. Realize that the only flow is the flow of love from the Great Spirit to you, from you to others, and from others back to you. They want me to read that again. Drop the seriousness on all levels and play it live so that the fear rolls off your back. Realize that the only flow is the flow of love from the Great Spirit. The flow of the Great Spirit to you, from you to others, and from others back to you. That's a great message right there. And number 27 is Dragonfly. And again, another one upside down. So what is the contrary? The contrary part of this is that, you may be out of focus, which is also what Swan has said. Become your own best friend. And again, focus. And Dragonfly is illusion. And the Dragonfly has been the keeper of the dream time and the illusionary facade we accept as our physical reality. Dragonfly is the essence of the winds of change, the messages of wisdom and enlightenment, and the communications from the elemental world. The elemental world is made up of tiny spirits of plants and of the elements of air, earth, fire, and water. In essence, the world is full of nature spirits. So the contrary is that, are you trying to prove to yourself or to someone else that you have power? Are you caught up in an illusion that weakens your true fear, your true feelings, or minimizes your abilities? Now, it seems we were talking about focus two times in these cards, and to be your own best friend. And so, if so, you may have contracted a Dragonfly dive bombing. If you're minimizing your own abilities, so that means you must have lost focus somewhere along the line. Look within and feel the sense of self energy within yourself. again, look to the inside. Be your own best friend. Notice if it is ebbing and find the point in time where you were deluded into believing that you would be happier if you changed because somebody else wanted you to. And in this world, there are lots of folks who are trying to change us into what they want us to believe. We can't lose our own focus. And we have got to, remember that we need to be our own best friend. So, with that said, those are the cards for this week. I hope that there was a message in there for you all. Ground yourself. Take off your shoes and jump up and down and put your hand on top of your head. I don't remember reading that before. But, and bring a little joy into your life and, let the chaos roll off your back. That's all good messages. Remember to be your own best friend.
Yes.
Without being snobbish,
Yeah, that is so true.
So I hope that made some sense to some folks.
Yeah.
I'm getting better at condensing the cards.
That went pretty fast. Hey, we're going to make it in our 2 hours for sure. Let's see.
Well, there ain't nothing wrong with that.
So, remember you were talking about how many people are in the least populated states are Wyoming at 576,851.
So, the less than 500,000 people.
Yeah.
Wow.
Vermont, which is 143,000, which Vermont's pretty small. Alaska, 733,000. North Dakota, 779,000. South Dakota, 886,000. Delaware, 989,000. Montana, 1 million. Rhode Island, 1 million. So Montana's got 1 million people in it. Huh, how about that? I thought Montana didn't have, but they've been growing pretty good. All those rich people have been moving out there buying little places,
Yeah. And see, now down here where I live, just above, the Florida line, Albany's got, several 100,000 people in it. Valdosta, same thing. Tallahassee, same thing. And each one of these little counties around here, I've counted up, and there are at least 1 million people that live in this little geographic area. And so in this little geographic area, there are 1 million people, which is bigger than there are more people here than in the entire state of Wyoming.
Oh, yeah. It says Georgia has 11 million people. 11 million people live in Georgia. And see, but you're right. So all these states combined, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana put together isn't even half the population of just Georgia.
Of the state of Georgia, yeah.
That's something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, all those East Coast, most of the East Coast places, they are packed full of people. It's amazing. Like Minnesota. We've been talking a lot about Minnesota. That's got 5 million people in it. Yeah. So yeah, kind of interesting to know how many people live in different states. And we know that there's a lot of people in these states, but I was in Wisconsin, but I haven't seen the population of Wisconsin. But I can look at it. I mean, yeah, here we go. 22, it was 5 million, almost 6 million people live in Wisconsin. No wonder why they're packed door to door. Yeah, most of them live in the southern half of Wisconsin. The upper half isn't populated much. But.
So there are between two states, Wisconsin and Minnesota, there are still more people in the state of Georgia.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Wow.
You know, that's why I guess you got bigger towns out there. You know, like you said, you already know there must be a, you know, a couple 100,000 in each city or whatever. But yeah,
Well, our county has about 35,000 people for the county.
yeah,
So the size, you know, Moultrie is a, you know, for down here, it's a decent sized small town. But, you know, for Thomas County, they're about 28 to 30,000 people. So, but you take these 30,000, 30, 30, 30, 30 and start adding them up. And then you go to the larger cities. And, you know, of course, Tallahassee is 70 miles south of me. It is in another state, but I'm thinking of the locale down here. So, you know, it's easy to count up, you know, 100,000 people in two or three counties,
yeah.
and then multiply that times two or three more counties, and you know, you got a 500,000 people easy.
And once you get into the big cities like Atlanta or something, there's got to be millions of people that live there.
Oh yeah, I think there's like 5 or 6 million people in up and around the Atlanta area, and then Macon's got probably at least a cool million around there, and then you Columbus, Georgia, with Fort Bragg and everything. There's a good bunch of folks over there, but you know, down here in the South, still, you know, we still got a decent amount of space between folk, and so we're not right on top of each other. And you know, for the county to only have 35,000 folks in it after all these years, it still about maintains about the same population. So I'm glad that hasn't changed much, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that is true. That is true. Yeah, because but that's the thing. It's you know, when you get too populated, like I said, if anything ever happens, you know, that like the cities, they depend on the country folk to bring them food because, you know, they're
Yeah.
not growing food, they're not contributing, you know, they're just doing their jobs. And that is the problem, I guess. You know, like the Indians out there, you know, the Sioux there, they didn't do as much trading because they didn't need anything. They didn't trade for a lot of guns, but their enemies, the Ojibwe, were big time traders with the Europeans, and they did have guns, and they chased them out of the country within kind of a war they had between the two tribes, because you know even when Custer was we did the thing on Custer, they were still using a lot of arrows, you know.
Yep.
Because they just didn't have the guns or the bullets to fight with. They were still using black powder guns when they did have. They had black powder guns, which was old technology by that. 1876, that was kind of getting old technology.
Yep, it was.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, because they'd had the repeating rifle since the end of the Civil War. So
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and yeah, it's amazing how, you know, 10 years or the guy with the most weapon. And then, like I said, they were still shooting a lot of arrows yet. And, you know, not every guy had guns and ammo, but they were still a competing force to be reckoned with because of their skills on the horse.
yeah, and when you got 30 Indians shooting arrows at the same time and, you know, into a crowd of folks, it's hard to avoid them. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, back in the day of, you know, medieval times and the Chinese, you know, they used to send just 1,000 arrows at one time. And they've learned too that sometimes in the medieval days, just because you were wearing chainmail or some, you know, heavy armor didn't necessarily stop an arrow.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And they know that even today that an arrow will go into and through a lot of Kevlar.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a powerful thing. Whereas, you know, the only difference between the arrow and the bullet was the fact that you had to get a lot closer. with the arrow to actually make it count. I mean, you could just shoot them up in the air and then hope, but you're not aiming. It was more of a close one-on-one weapon. That's why the buffalo hunters in the fight with Adobe Walls, the Indians are standing a half a mile away and they're at their big long shooting guns, just shooting them away, and they're like, holy cow,
Yep.
We shouldn't be out here in open range because we're getting killed off, and we can't even get close.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, so weapons are quite the important thing. I mean, just like I said, that they may have been great marksmen with the arrow and the bow, but if you can't get close to your enemy, it doesn't do you much good. And same with the black powder gun. That black powder gun only shoots so far, but if you got a rifle with a rifle barrel and a shell, regular thing, you could shoot a long ways, 100 yards, pretty good,
and accurately,
yeah, accuracy. Whereas otherwise, black powder gun is kind of it's accurate to a certain point, but after that, your bullets might go anywhere. I know I got a black
100 feet.
Yeah, I got a black powder gun, and it's great to shoot. It's a lot of fun, except for when you want to shoot a little farther. There's a certain point where the bullet starts to drop, and but you just can't shoot. But to a certain point, it's really powerful. It's really deadly gun. Shoots a big ass bullet, knock a tree right off the stump. But,
we killed a pine tree one time with a 56 caliber. Yeah.
Yeah. I got a big 58 caliber Hawkeye, and boy, that bullet's huge, and
the percussion will knock you on your butt if you're not careful.
Yeah, but it is what it is. Especially, like I said, you put a lot of gunpowder in there, and it's going to give more kick and go a little farther, but it doesn't mean it's going to be so accurate either.
Right.
A little bit of one and some of the other. That's why the more advanced, it's like nowadays, even the countries with the more advanced weapons are the more powerful countries. Hey, they got lasers, and we're still shooting with guns. These guys got satellites. Well, how do you defeat it? They got airplanes. That's why when they had the balloons and then the airplanes and everything you're dropping bombs on top of people's heads and going miles across the enemy lines because it's just a more effective weapon.
There was a story and I'd heard it from a couple of different people, that back during the days of Vietnam, they had, there was this little Vietnamese boy that would stand towards the end of the runway and where the jets were taking off. And he was throwing rocks at the airplanes, right? And they used to laugh at the kid because he's throwing rocks at this $1 million jet aircraft, until one day when one of those rocks went into the intake and dropped one of those $1 million aircraft just beyond the end of the runway. And then they wouldn't let him stand on the end of the runway and throw rocks anymore. So there are some times when, the old methods still work. You could throw a rock at something, and if you hit it just right, you can still break it. So there was, some of these folks that are, with drones flying overhead, there was wanting to shoot at them with a thing, but they found out that, if you take an arrow, and they've got some of these, that you can actually, you've got more mass with an arrow that could mess up the drone versus a single bullet that would just pass through at a high velocity. So you might want to shoot arrows at that drone you can also pick your arrow up and shoot again. But anyway, it's like, so sometimes low tech is still a good tech.
Yeah, and you're right. A rock can really, mess things up when you get, so sophisticated. It's like you got something like your cell phone, for instance, right? All this electronic gizmo. You got a camera and a clock, and you can talk to it. It's like a mini computer held in your hand. But you drop it in some water, and it doesn't work no more. A little
Or
bit.
I had it in my pocket. I had it in my pocket, my cell phone, and I was sweating and had it in my shirt pocket, and sweat dropped into the end of the phone, and it went out for 2 days.
Wow.
A drop of sweat, But also, in this day and age with these, drones, a slingshot and a good bag of marbles, and especially if you were any good, you don't need a gun. But anyway.
Yeah.
Did you ever try your drone out, by the way?
Not yet. No, I haven't gotten it.
Shame on you.
I got it. I can't get the right app on the phone to get it to go. So.
Oh.
But one of these days I will. I gotta have more time. Maybe next week. I really need to get out there and do something like that. Richard says I've got air rifles and pistols. Yeah, but when you're a little drone there, a net probably would work way better. Because they get tangled in the blades.
And they've got these. I say they're new. They've got these net guns now they're very compact, and you can get. So it's like instead of killing your assailant, shoot one of these things at them, and they'll get tangled up. And so it's like, take out a drone and somebody's spying on you, boom, bring that puppy right on down. So, but anyway.
Yeah, and that's true because shooting at a drone, you might hit it, and if you don't hit it in a vulnerable spot, it can keep on flying. And then the thing of it too is if you're shooting that gun up in the air and you're missing it, that bullet's got to come down somewhere.
Yep.
Are you going to hit somebody else unintendedly? I don't
there
know.
You go, and you can see an arrow coming.
Well, yeah, and sometimes an arrow might not do as much damage either. So I don't know. Anyway, but it doesn't goes. I mean, you can kind of see where it goes too. Whereas a gun, you shoot it up in the air, and it's like, well, it's gone. It's up there somewhere. And you just got to cross your fingers. It doesn't come down on your own head because that's what
right.
They did that in Western towns. The guys would get there and they'd shoot their gun, boom, 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 and people would get killed unintentionally.
Sleeping in their bed at night. Yep. They'd be upstairs in the saloon and get killed. Yep.
Yeah. How crazy is that? I got killed by a stray bullet. Nobody knows who it was. And back in the day, they didn't have all this forensic stuff. It's like, well, stray bullet. Next. Your life was in your own hands back then.
Yeah, and I wonder if that can be considered manslaughter.
Well, probably, but who do you blame it on? Like I said, they didn't have the forensics to say, well, was it this guy? Was it his bullet or that guy? It's amazing. When you really start researching some of these Western outlaws and stuff, all the crap that they got away with. Oh, well, it was just an accident, We got in a little, what was it? Pat Garrett. He got in a fight with, he was a buffalo hunter. Him and his buddy were out buffalo hunting, and they got in some kind of argument. Some way or another, one shot the other. It wasn't Pat. Pat Garrett shot the guy, and he kind of felt bad, and he realized he better turn himself in. He went and turned himself in to the authorities. And they were like, we're just going to write that off. We don't have time to deal with that, It was a squabble. We'll write it down as the incident. So basically, it was a recorded history. Go bury your buddy. There you go. I mean, how do you today's world, that would have been, you killed your friend there. you were shooting at him or you shot at him, and then you're going to prison for 20 years, right?
Yep, at least.
Yeah, you shot and killed him. Not just, okay, whatever. We don't have time for this. Just go back to your buffalo hunt. Yeah. Anyway, you got a show tonight?
I think so, for a short time.
All right. Well, good deal. Okay, everyone. I'm glad y'all joined us tonight. Richard, Elderberry, Peachy Keen, Peachy Keen, Queen Peachy. Oh, sorry. My tongue-tied, twisted.
Say that 3 times real quick.
Oh my gosh. And Mossy Man came to join us. Anyway, show tonight. So anyway, thank you all for joining me. Remember, go out and do something nice for somebody else. Remember all the good things. If you want to find more information, go look up some of this stuff. And it's just fascinating how these people lived and lifestyle and whole 9 yards. It's amazing. And anyway, with that, remember, be the frequency you want to receive, everybody. Love you all. Peace, everybody.
Cheers.